up everyone, welcome to Yorkshire Gamers, a Reet Big Wargames podcast, and this episode 22 of our ongoing mission to bring big wargames back into the limelight. And today, my guest is Simon Miller of To The Strongest fame, and we'll be chatting with Simon about his huge collection of figures, his rule sets, his philosophy on rules, and all the usual features that you're familiar with: the quiz, Wargames Room 101, and the Venn Diagram of Wargaming, the whole shebang. We're in the build-up period for the results for the Little Wars TV Caesar Awards, in which Yorkshire Gamer was nominated for the best podcast. So I've got my fingers and toes crossed for the results of that at the end of the month, and we should know before the next episode is released. So good luck to everyone who's involved for any of the categories, and let's see who wins on the evening. There's still work to do in relation to my missionary to make big games more popular and more mainstream, dare we say. I had listened to a lot of podcasts, and I'm not going to name names, but there was one UK podcast that did one on small scale gaming that just went through all the old cliches of, oh, you can't do that in 28mm, and oh, it's all too big. And yeah, for some people it is, but there's a lot of people out there who do big games, who enjoy big games, who aspire to big games, and we're out there and we like it big and we shout it loud in all the supermarkets and shopping centres throughout Europe, and then after a short space of time in the police cells, we're back out again shouting, we like it big again. Personally, it's been very busy at work at the moment, and I've slacked off quite a bit with the painting. I'm well behind on my total for the Analog Hobbies paint challenge, but it's been great to see everyone's entries all the way through that, and it's coming to an end on the 21st of this month, and we'll be thinking about what we're going to do next year very soon. So, just a couple of words about the interview before we begin. And unfortunately, Simon shares a room with his wife for the internet connection, and she had a work meeting to do, and we had to kind of hurry up a little bit towards the end of the interview, which was a little bit of a shame because we were having a great chat, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy this interview. But I'll get Simon back on one of the catch-up episodes in the future, and we'll cover the bit that we don't quite get to, his wavy bases, and hopefully his Renaissance rules will be out by then as well, and we can have a chat about that. In the final section, I had to re-record a couple of my questions because I had some tech issues with my microphone again. And one final point in relation to the interview. At the start, when we're talking about games, we talk about Flames of War, and that's our mistake, and I do apologise. We were actually talking about World in Flames, which is a massive World War II board game, and the subsequent prequel to that, Days of Decision, which it took us about 20 minutes to remember what it was called, but there we go. So we've not suddenly gone Flames of War. It was a genuine mistake on our part. So, without further ado, let's do interview. Welcome to the interview section of episode 22 of the Yorkshire Gamer podcast, and today we've got another treat for you. We've talked to another big gamer and a rule writer. In fact, when we met up at Partisan last year, he was involved in a huge game involving some of the biggest figures we've ever seen. But more of that later on. My guest is the king of the grid. He loves a straight line on his gaming cloth, but he prefers a wavy line on his bases. He's loved by the people who make the playing cards, but he's hated equally by those who make tape measures. In fact, my guest has made turning an ace over cool again. Not since Bruce Forsyth did Play Your Cards Right have we had so much fun with a deck of 52. So, if you want to go to your strongest or battle it out between the rightful king and those upstarts in Parliament, he's your man. He's big, he's red, and it says here that he's a bat. Let's welcome Simon Miller to the Reet Big War Games podcast. Hello, Simon.
Hello, very nice to be here.
Lovely.
Very nice.
Well,
What an intro.
thank
Marvellous.
I'm trying to get famous for my intros. I do like I do
No,
like
I like it.
I
Very,
do
very
like
good.
a good intro.
Very,
So
very good.
we met briefly, didn't we, mate, at parties, and we had a chat.
Yeah, we did.
And today you're going to get the full Yorkshire Gamer treatment, the full 4 parts, as we like to say. And
Excellent.
the first thing that we do before you get comfortable is we like to put people on a little bit of pressure and get them to do a 4-minute summary of their wargaming history. So from previous experience, you'll either do it in 30 seconds, no problems, or you'll keep rambling for about 6 or 7, and I'll have to cut you
Oh.
off.
Hopefully you won't go that far. I'm more likely to be near the 30-second end of the stick, I expect.
Excellent. Well, I've got a little timer here, and as we get towards the 4 minutes, the music from Countdown will come on,
Oh,
and
excellent.
and then if you go too far, Di Regan from the Sweeney will tell you to shut it. So there's lots of warnings coming up. So
Excellent.
in your own time, Simon, 4 minutes, just a summary of your wargaming history, mate.
Okay, well, I kind of always wargamed. My mum tells a story about when I was in my pram as a very small child. She took me past a toy shop, and I waved at the toy shop window at a couple of plastic soldiers that were in the toy shop window, who were 54mm guardsmen, or no, 60mm, about 60mm tall, Hong Kong made finest red guardsmen. And she bought them for me, and I clutched them in my hands and took them home. And they were Fred and Charlie, and they were the genesis of my collections. And I went on from there. I guess I used to play a lot with Airfix. I'm sure everybody had Airfix. Particularly love the ancient Britons and the Romans. Anything really from Airfix. But I also used to play a lot with Lego bricks, so I could do big battles. So I'd have the 8 stud bricks would be battalions, and I could fight Waterloo or whatever. Thermopylae I remember doing as a child, with the blankets draped over books and so forth. Then as I got into as my age increased and I had a little bit more spending money, I'm sure, like many others, I went into the minifigs and some of the early lead figures that were only really just Hinchliffe at the time were coming out. Got those, and really played stuff at home until I went to uni. And when I went to uni, I kind of got distracted by Dungeons and Dragons, which I had an absolute passion for. Squandered my 3 or 4 years, 4 or 5 years, squandered the right word, of my life playing Dungeons and Dragons and RuneQuest with my friends there, which are very happy experiences. The university wasn't as a whole that successful for me, but I never got a degree. But I did have 4 or 5 years of quality gaming.
That's the best result.
After that, I found my way to Central London Wargames Club and played lots of different things, WRG rules, mostly with 15mm figures, Romans and so forth. I had a few armies, borrowed one off a friend, used to play quite a bit there. And other things as well. 40k, I remember playing 40k when it first came out. That was a laugh for a while. Still got my collection from that. And we did Vietnam and colonial wars and all sorts of really, really enjoyable things. Something different every week. 1/300th Western Desert microtanks. Love that still. And I played there for a while. And then as you get a bit older and you've got kids, then I had to start playing from home. And used to play a lot of board games for a while. World in Flames, Command and Colours Ancient got me back into wargaming indirectly, because once I enjoyed playing that with the wooden blocks, I started playing it again with figures. And that led me to do a big Zama game at the Society of Ancients, one of their battle days, that made me some good friends. People like Doug Page-Croft, who I'm still in touch with. Lots of people got involved in that. And we started getting these really big war games together. After a while, I got a little bit bored with Command and Colours Ancients, decided to write my own rules. And then they turned out to be, I wrote them partly to do big battles at shows, and they turned out to be quite successful, and sort of gathered people around me. And then people started asking if I could publish the rules, so I published them as a on a sheet of A4 originally. Oh, I can hear the clock in the background. Pressure, pressure. Um, and eventually I published my own To the Strongest Ancient Rules. A little later, I got together with Andrew Brentnell and we wrote for King and Parliament for the English Civil War set. And now I'm looking at the 1670s, the 1680s, and beyond. And I think that is my 4 minutes.
Perfect.
That's my timer going off there.
Oh, that was perfect, mate. That was absolutely perfect.
I was cheating.
Oh dear, very good,
There we
very
are.
good. I'm impressed with that. So
I would have liked to have heard the Sweeney actually, anyhow. But you can use that on me later if I blather too much.
Yeah, I'll save him for. I'll get my Sweeney soundboard out and play some clips. So what got you into history then? What was the thing that?
I don't know. I mean, what does get you into history? I remember as a child, I had such mighty research tomes as the Ladybird book on Alexander the Great.
Yeah, essential reading.
Essential reading. And that was probably quite. I'm sure sets of miniatures have been based on far less than that. Just anything really. Encyclopedias. I liked. When I was a kid, I really liked fiction. One of the things my mum did was take me an awful lot to the local library, and I kind of devoured all of the historical fiction in the library. Many very unsuitable books, I'm sure, at the time, like G.A. Henty, Rider Haggard, anything by Rider Haggard. Loved those sci-fi books. But yeah, got me just always. I don't know. I sometimes think people are just born with a passion for history, and I have got that.
Yeah, I remember a magazine I used to get as a child called Look and Learn, and they always used to have like I remember distinctly like a Roman cartoon that was on the back of it and it had the Colosseum and loads of soldiers and stuff, and I was just drawn into it and drawn into the overall pageantry of the whole thing.
Yeah, it's the spectacle, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, there's the history and there's the spectacle, and there is, I think, amongst us, those of us that like to do a really big battle, it is about getting that sense of spectacle. Huge scale, cast of thousands.
Yeah. Where did you end up at university then?
I went to Imperial College.
Imperial College London.
Yes,
you live in London as well, don't you? So
I live in London, and about the only thing I took away from Imperial College was I met my wife there, who wasn't from Imperial College, but I met her near the uni, and that's about the only thing I took away with me from the whole 5-year experience of not getting a degree.
Oh, good effort. I'm impressed. Well, as we like to say on this podcast, we're very regionally Yorkshire based. So
I'm drinking Yorkshire tea, I should say. Here.
Oh, good man.
There we are.
Man. Well, you're going to get a point on the quiz then, because that comes
excellent
up later on. But we call anything south of Sheffield. That's what we say. Anything south of Sheffield is south. I didn't know whether you might have ventured up north for your university.
No, not really. I haven't been. I don't go up north a great deal. I just Newark a lot for the shows up there. I don't think I've missed a Newark for about a decade now. Must be.
Newark seems to be the northern frontier of most wargaming. It's as far as Henry Hyde could get. It's as far. Bless it, the Lardies made it up to Steel Lard this time. So. We're slowly getting people to come and see us up here in the wilderness in the northern tribes.
Well, it's quite good, isn't it? Because of its location, you can get the Scots coming down as well.
Yeah, it's a perfect location.
So it's one of those few places where you can actually see everyone that's into historical wargaming under one roof.
You mentioned in your introduction board games. What is that something you still do? It's kind of on the periphery, I think, of figure gamers, but I think it's a lot more popular than figure games in general.
Well, I have one of my local friends, Ian, has always been very into board games, but he's much more into them than am I, really. Um, and we have at times played a fair bit of
Mm,
the board games, but not for like 15 years now, I guess.
mm,
I think the last big outburst was the Command and Colors, where we used to play that, 2 or 3
yeah,
games a week for quite a while. We did some Command and Colors Napoleonics. I mean, some people say that To the Strongest is a board game. I think officially on Board
yeah.
Games Geek, it is described as a board game, but I can't say I really think of it that way. Um, for me, it's just a vehicle for moving large numbers of figures around.
Interesting. I mean, you mentioned Flames of War. That was one of the games that we played when we were at university as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was. Was that the whole shebang? Because there was one
yeah.
that was sort of set just before World War Two. I can't remember what it was
Yes,
called now.
yes, you're
Like
absolutely right.
like a diplomatic game where you.
It was.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember
What
what
was
that was
that
called.
called? You could play the pre-war, and
That was it.
in
Yeah,
theory, that would lead you into playing Flames of War. And
yeah,
it was a brilliant, brilliant game, Flames of War. But it became a little bit overloaded with sort of chrome over the years. Do you remember
yeah,
Planes of War, Tanks of War?
yeah,
Um, it became it came a little bit sort of top heavy. And
yeah,
when you played it with the pre-war bit,
yeah,
it did change enough things that you wouldn't necessarily get a good balanced game out of it when it actually got to the war. But anyhow,
yeah.
one of the others always wanted to give up in about 1940. It was sometimes it was pretty clear, that one side or the other, one side or the other had lost. I remember one year when Russia tried a surprise invasion on Germany. That was a
Mm.
short game. I don't know if
Yeah.
we ever played it to the end.
No, I don't think we ever managed it either. I think once you got that huge, there was a Napoleonic one. It's just behind me somewhere.
Yeah,
Empires at Arms, I think it was
yeah,
called. Yes, Empires at Arms, just behind me. It was exactly the same. On we
yeah,
the you put the maps out, and the maps were about 16 foot
yeah.
long, and you had all these tiny counters in, and then the cat would come in and just completely destroy. You were building up for an offensive in Russia,
Yeah.
and before the winter got you, the cat had
The cat will get you.
scrapped everything off there.
Start again.
So, do you
Yeah.
game at home, Simon, or
Not really. Not really anymore. I can't show you a picture at the moment, but
mm,
my dining room where I used to game
yeah?
is part dining room, part warehouse now.
Ah,
All of the stock that I sell for To the Strongest
yeah,
lives along one wall in there, and that doesn't really leave enough room for a 6x4 table.
mm,
Um, I I have been playing the odd game, but not for a long time with my local friend Ian. I'm planning to do some to get some gaming going again with him
yeah,
on a smaller, more convenient table using some wooden blocks I've made for playtesting, the
yeah,
Renaissance version, which I'm still working on and need to finish. So I thought we'd start off with an initial round of playtesting for that. Hopefully we'll do that fairly soon.
yeah,
But no, I don't really. So my the games I get to play are few and far between. Shows, I'm often talking to people, so I can't always get to play
yeah,
the game. Sometimes I do. If we're running it twice in a day, maybe I'll join in the second game. I think
yeah.
at Partisan, I was both engaging the punters, umpiring, playing, and supporting the player on my right who didn't know the rules,
Yeah,
whilst trying to chat to you. So it
yeah.
was, it was, I was a bit thinly stretched that day. Um,
Well, I think that particular partisan show, there was a lot of people who hadn't seen other gamers for a long time,
yeah,
and I think I chatted to you on my second time round. And I think the first time round, the sort of perimeter of the hall took me about 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
which a tortoise would have been proud of. It was very, very slow, but it was lovely. It was lovely to catch up and see and see it.
Yeah. I'd be interested. I wasn't at Hammerhead. I'm wondering whether it's a little bit more normal feeling because it was odd at Partisan. It was slightly
Mm,
post-apocalyptic Partisan. The last one, there
yeah,
was the masks and people are obviously anxious and
yeah.
um,
And
so,
then we had Fiasco, the lead show, and that was very similar.
yeah,
And then Salute, it just had a massive reduction in numbers
yeah,
from previous years, and unfortunately I didn't make it to Partisan, but the York show was fairly well attended. That
yeah,
went to February, so
yeah.
hopefully we're all coming out of it.
Hopefully it'll be a bit more normal this
So,
year.
do you get yourself to a club still?
No, I think of myself as nominally a sort of very removed member of the Central London War Games Club, where
Yeah.
I did used to play for about 10 years. I'd have gone there
Mm,
almost every week until really, once you start getting a couple of young kids, it's harder
yeah.
to get out. Then we had for a time, we had a little group of about half a dozen of us. We called ourselves Muswell Hill Militia, a name that probably would get you banned on Facebook as a
Yeah, I was going to
dangerous
say you need to be
dangerous
careful with that on
right-wing.
Twitter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we did that for a few years. In fact, we started playing. I used to be able to get like an 8 or 10 foot long by 6 foot table, I guess. Back in those days in my lounge, and people used to come around here and we'd game. That was a lot of fun.
Mm,
But gradually, people kind of drifted or moved away a little bit, and
mm,
so no, really my games just tend to be the ones, the shows where we run the big games,
mm,
and um, tournaments. We have usually in a usual year, I guess 5 or 6 to the strongest tournaments. Maybe there are 6, 7, 8, in fact, but I only get to maybe 5 or 6, and usually get to play 4 games at those,
yeah,
which is good because you need to keep abreast of the rules.
yeah,
It's surprising. People come to me as the font of all knowledge, but I'm sometimes I can be quite rusty because I've not played for 6 months.
yeah,
Um, but usually I can. It takes me about one tournament to get myself up to speed, and at the next one
yeah,
I'm a reasonable contender. I quite enjoy the tournaments. They're quite it's quite exciting to play
mm,
against that time pressure.
yeah,
I'm not that competitive. I'm probably slightly more competitive than the average, but
mm,
it's quite um, when you've got to really focus and concentrate on what you're doing and pull that strategy out of the hat. It's nice to do it once in a while.
So, just before we go on, the Days of Decision was
Days of
the
Decision,
Days of
yes,
Decision.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was
Uh,
good. Wasn't as good as Flames of War, but it was good, and it was an interesting concept.
yeah, I remember playing it a few
Mm.
times. Really, really enjoyed it. It was very good indeed. You're known mostly for your ancient stuff.
Yeah.
Is that your favourite historical period to
Oh,
game?
gosh. Um, well, that's a whole lot of periods, isn't it? Really.
It's yeah,
I don't know. I think at the moment, I probably would say I'm more interested in the 17th century, which will probably surprise a lot of people. Um,
yeah,
not it doesn't mean I'm not interested in ancients. It just
mm,
means that I guess I started off by writing the ancient rules, and
mm,
then during the process of writing the ancient rules, I didn't decided I didn't want to alienate most of my potential market by a good portion of my potential market by not including the medieval period. So we kind of bolted it on so that the rules would work up till about 1500 or so, and I've got very funny latterly. I seem to be working through history in a sensible chronological order.
that makes
Um,
sense.
uh, I found myself getting quite drawn into the medieval
Yeah,
period and the early Renaissance, and golly, since then I've been absolutely mad. It's very exciting discovering the Renaissance and the later developments in tactics.
mm,
up to and beyond the English Civil War. I just find it utterly fascinating. So at the moment, I've got, I guess, if you look at what I've currently been painting and basing, I'm still basing up some ancient units that I had in the pipeline. Did a lot of work last year for a big projected salute game that obviously hasn't happened because there hasn't been a salute, but I did a lot of the modelling for that last year. So I guess about half of what I've done has been for ancients. But then the big projects I'm working on are a huge Swiss army, a Burgundian army, which I seem to be working on in parallel with David Imrie, where I think we're hopefully we'll get a game on a table at some point, but he's got about half of a Burgundian army based exactly to the same style that I'm using, and I've got about half of a Burgundian army. So there's a
I remember
marriage made in
seeing
heaven there.
some of your pipe blocks quite a few years ago now on
Yeah,
some of the
yeah,
forums. I take it it's a
yeah.
slow burner, is it, or has it just
It
got
has
massive?
been. So I'm not one of these people that like really will concentrate on one period. I've always got about 6 or 7 different things on the go,
Yeah.
and I flit around between these. And I guess I probably based Burgundians first about 2-3 years ago, and I did a pike block, and then I added another couple of blocks of pike last year. Not very nice. A guy called Mats Elzinger helped me do the flags for the Liégeois sort of militia types. So
Yeah.
we got those done, and I've got all of the infantry really for a modest-sized Burgundian army, and I haven't done the cavalry yet, but I've got, I don't know, maybe 80, 90 painted Burgundian cavalry that I haven't had time to finish and base. So I could put an army together pretty.
And
A few months.
are you a 28 mil kind of guy, or do
Yeah,
you mix between
almost
the scales?
exclusively.
Yeah.
I have. I used to do 15 mil, but I gave away all my 15 mils to my local friend who does 15 mil, and I've got some very old now 6 mil micro tanks up in the loft. Love them. I have thought sometimes about. I would quite like to do 10 or 12 mil. It's just I I I like the 28s, and I'm into them, and I've got loads of stuff. If I had like 2 or 3 lifetimes, I'd probably do the other scales as well.
What's
The
the big
same armies.
what's the big draw into 28s then? What do you
Um,
particularly like about that scale?
well, I guess the amount of detail there is in them, and if you step back, a couple of feet, you've got some of the bigger games on the table with 2,000, 3,000 figures, it does look like a fairly convincing battle. Yeah, I guess I like them. I can see them to paint them. They're not too small, but that isn't to say I don't not dislike the other scales. I could imagine other scales are much more sensible. For instance, I mean, if
Yeah,
I was doing English Civil War again now, if I was just starting English Civil War, maybe I'd look at doing it all in the new steel fist ones, which is I think
yeah,
traditional
they're
15 mil
really, really
size.
nice, really nice.
Or my chum Andrew Brentnell, he's got all his English Civil War in sort of 12 to 15 mil figures. I, maybe that would be a sensible scale to go. I mean,
Yeah.
it's horses for courses, really. I mean, I can do a battle on a 15 or 20 foot wide table in quite a few different periods in 28 mil. Other people I know like Andrew Brentnell can do the same with 10 mil figures, and it looks more like, if you're doing something like Marston Moor, it looks more like the historical battle in the smaller scale. There's no doubt about it. I guess I just got the 20 sort of inertia from 28 mil. I carry on
Are you
momentum rather.
yeah? Are you a painter yourself? Then do you do most of
Yeah.
your own figures?
Ooh, yes and no. So I'm a slow painter. I know the last few nights I've been painting some extra cavalry, some extra horses, and I can produce about one horse a night
All right,
in
okay.
an evening's painting. So I'm not fast, but luckily I know a bunch of people who do paint, and particularly one of my other local friends, Sean McTague. He can produce figures at like 5 or 10 times the rate that I can.
Mm.
Basically, most of the figures I either buy fully painted, or I buy them that are where they're about 2/3 painted, and I'll add highlights and ink, do some
Okay, that's a
final
good idea.
assembly and
Yeah.
whatever. I very much like to buy part painted figures on eBay and finish them off. It
Mm.
kind of There's something nice about actually rescuing a partly painted figure. I just love doing that. Making something that was bad, good again. As long as yeah, it's at its best when you've had a good painter who's got about halfway and given up, as opposed to trying to recover a figure that's painted by someone that's really bad and you can't make a thought pass out of the sow's ear.
Yeah,
But
Robbie Roddis, who was on episode 14,
yeah,
he's done that with English Civil War. He's kind of set out to rescue unwanted 15 mil, or was it 28 mil? I can't remember.
yeah,
Figures from eBay and get them painted up and bring them back to life again. So
yeah. I had a happy period of that before for King and Parliament came out,
yeah,
where for about 6 months I was buying figures on English Civil War figures on eBay, and figures, really nicely painted figures, were selling for nothing because no one was interested in the English Civil War at all.
yeah.
And I made the mistake of publishing a set of rules. You can't get anything that's half decently painted. People want to pay a sensible price for.
Yeah,
It's a real shame. A
that's
real shame.
you need to finish your army before you publish your rules, mate.
Yeah, I think that would have been the way to go.
You've learned a lesson there.
That
You've
would have
learned
been
a
the way to
lesson.
go. But yeah, the I've had the same things with some other scales actually. I've been working on 1672 figures, and you used to always there'd be a unit of those come up every week on eBay. And since I mentioned I was doing it, I haven't seen any. I look every day. There's none there. There's none there. I think people
Oh,
are holding on to them.
you must be a trendsetter then. You must be a trendsetter. So,
Yeah. So
one of the regular features on this show is something I call the Venn diagram of wargaming,
oh yeah,
and and this is just a little bit of a fun thing to
yeah,
break down wargaming personalities into 4 sections, and then just see how your particular set fits together. And the 4 that we've got are wargamer,
yeah,
painter,
yeah,
collector,
yeah.
and historian. So, which of those? I mean, you might all meet in the middle, but are any of those more prevalent than the others, or
Wow.
how do you feel about them?
I'm definitely I'm definitely an obsessive collector. I mean, I'm verging on the edge of hoarder. Really,
Excellent,
I have
excellent.
got I find it very hard to resist a well painted war games figure, even if it's not my period, and probably
Yeah,
never will be my period. And I'm quite capable of accidentally picking up like 4 or 5 figures from a chum and then painting another 2,000 to match. Uh,
yeah, that's good.
so collector, really big.
Yeah,
Historian, yeah, I am passionate about the history, um, and funnily enough, I am actually writing a or helping to write a book at the moment on a battle, but I'm not really I never had the historian training. I really wanted to do history as a
mm.
degree subject, but I picked engineering instead, which was a big mistake.
Well,
Hasn't served me well.
you're talking to a fellow engineer, so I know what you're
Uh,
talking about.
well, I haven't used my engineering as much as you might. Well, all that much, but the historian I would have liked. Painter, I'm more a baser than a painter. I mean, I finish figures off.
Mm,
I'm quite good, but I mean, there are great painters out there, like my chum David Imrie,
mm,
uh, just breathtaking what they can do with paint
mm.
and how quickly they can do it.
Yeah,
Um, uh, Yeah,
Yeah,
those are the painters. I'm
he
more a
does
collector.
some lovely stuff, David, doesn't he? And I saw his game at the Partisan show that we were talking about earlier on.
With his chums.
Yeah,
Oh, that
really,
was a
really
good
good.
looking game.
It was
Bodkins, I think, isn't it?
yeah, superb, absolutely.
Uh, that that just looked brilliant. And Wargamer, well, if you look at it in terms of the actual time I spend playing, that probably is the last of
Mm,
the four, because I spend much more time being a collector, a historian, um, or whatever, than I actually do gaming. I would
mm,
like to game more, and maybe I'll be able to. We're coming out of this. Hopefully, we're coming out of this COVID thing, and we'll be
mm.
able to get together and game a little bit more. And I would enjoy doing that.
Brilliant. Well, we're just coming to the end of the first section now. So, just before we do that, I always like to get people to just let me know where you are on social media, so that people who listen to this can find you. So,
Yes.
what do you do, and where are you?
So I've got various blogs. The Big Red Bat Cave is my main ancients blog
Hmm.
and general blog, where most anything I post is on there, and I usually manage to post about do a blog post about twice a week. Sometimes it depends really what's churning off the production line. Then I've got another blog called For King and Parliament, which is where I exclusively have the English Civil War stuff. And I've got an obscure blog called My Very Own Spanish Ulcer,
Oh,
which is
very
where
good.
I hide my guilty Napoleonic secrets.
Well, I have to say that I do a little bit of research on each of the people I'm going to talk to, and I
Yeah.
didn't find that. So,
Ah, well, there you are. I
it is
told you it was a well guarded secret. Um,
unfortunately, about 1,500 people end up listening to this, so
oh,
you might get some more
really?
hits. You might
Wow.
get
Hello,
some
everyone.
more
Whoops.
hits.
Yeah. So it's I've been I have been I was saying one gets obsessed with collecting. I've been slowly collecting the Imperial Guard as time permits.
Yeah.
Mostly the French Imperial Guard, and one of the things on my uh, would like to do list is one big Napoleonic battle, and the one I've always fancied is Montmirail, where the Imperial Guard fought the Russians, and
Is that one of
I
the
think
1814 battles?
yes, in the
Yeah,
winter with the
around
snow on the
Hanau,
ground.
that sort of time.
Yeah, and I think that would be a
Mm,
corking battle to do. So I've got most of the guard troops. I've got a lot of French line. What I've been waiting for a long time for plastic Russians in greatcoats to come out, and I
mm.
think someone's actually producing a line of those now. I did see something a few months back.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I've seen them.
Um,
I've seen the Crimean Russian in greatcoats, and the
yes, didn't
Warlord do. They're in plastic,
yeah.
but I've not seen any Napoleonics off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, there is oh gosh, that plastic one of the plastic companies is
Is
talking
it?
about doing it.
Oh, is it Atlantic Warlord?
War Games Atlantic,
War
yeah.
Games Atlantic.
So I'm
Yeah.
going to see what they look like when they come out, because obviously you're going to need like 12, 15, 18 battalions of them,
Mm,
and I just want to do most of the Napoleonics in plastic for
yeah.
portability and ease and
Mm.
cheapness. I have visions of a spray can, spraying the whole army with a spray can, and just doing a little bit of highlighting. I'm sure that won't work out.
I think that's one of the great Napoleonic cheats that's been going on for years. We used to do it just before we did a big
Yeah,
game. We'd all be painting stuff in greatcoats
yeah,
just to get it.
absolutely.
We need 20 battalions for Saturday.
Yeah,
Don't worry,
yeah.
greatcoats.
No piping for me tonight. It's greatcoats, tatty greatcoats.
Oh,
That's what we
superb.
need. And I also think it looked very characteristic of Russian army
Yeah,
entirely
it
in greatcoats.
it does.
So
It looks very good.
that's my Napoleonic blog. I think those are my three blogs. I've got there's a forum as well, to the strongest forum, that
Yeah.
quite a lot of people come by and ask questions and expose my lack of knowledge of the rules. Um, Often there are people that are much better informed than me.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you
um,
do anything like Twitter or Facebook or?
Facebook, I do. Basically, I tend to what I tend to do is I'll do a blog post, and then because the blog post is a really good way of writing about something and then being able to find it again in the future. And
Yeah.
then I put a link onto Facebook from there. So usually onto I've got a To the Strongest Facebook site. So anything that's in my blog will go onto the Facebook site. And obviously I go around a lot of other people's. I look at other people's blogs.
Yeah.
I look at other people's Facebook posts. But those are the main things that I do. I've got my Big Red Bat shop where I sell the rules and so forth from in the UK. And for people who are particularly in Europe, I can't sell rules to Europe because of the VAT. Haven't got any way
Oh
of
yeah, there's some
doing
new
the VAT. So,
regulations, isn't there? Yeah.
but people in Europe and the US, people in Europe in particular, can buy off the Wargames Vault where I sell my rules from there too. But mostly it's still built around my blog, which is interesting because blogs are kind of slightly beleaguered. You can see that some of the traffic has dropped away from the big days of 5 or so years ago. But I still think that it's just such an excellent way of.
Yeah, it was. I don't know if you know Big Lee from the
I
Post
that's what
Reject.
I saw his post
Yeah,
a
so did
few
I.
days
Yeah.
ago, and it got me thinking. I've been thinking the same thing, but stuff on Facebook is so sort of ephemeral. You can't find it again. Whereas
Yeah.
if you put it in a blog, you can go back. I can see, stuff from 6 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
I can find things I've done before.
Yeah, I think that like a scenario post where you put in a map down and you put in orders of battle down for people to use as a guide later on in the future, that doesn't work anywhere else apart from a blog post because,
No,
as you say, people need to find it, and then you need the space to give all that information so that people can then go back to it and use it. Because the number of times when I've gone, oh, we're going to do Spanish Civil War this weekend. Oh, I remember that on Steve's Balogun's a brilliant one for Spanish Civil
yeah,
War. Go
yeah,
on there, find it, download it, play the game.
yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah, and
Um,
that's where blogs really win out. So I still feel very wedded to
mm,
blogs.
yeah.
But We'll, let's have to see really where it goes. I wish they were a bit more better supported. I don't feel
Mm.
they're anyone that's put in charge of running blogs at Google is probably someone that's been sidelined from great promotion opportunities.
Yeah,
It's
they
probably a bit of a
probably got sacked when Google Plus ended, and this is
oh,
the job
Google
that they've been
Plus.
sidelined into.
Google Plus. That was a badly conceived idea, wasn't it? That was
Yeah,
so poor.
excellent,
So yeah, blogs. I do love a blog, and I still look at other people's. And
excellent. Right, well, we'll draw a line under section 1, and we're going to be back in a second for our big game chat. And we're back in the room, everyone. And regular listeners will know that part 2 of the podcast is always about big games, and that's whether our guest is a big game or not. And we're actually all right this week because we are preaching to the converted here with
yeah,
Son. So, what does a big game mean to you?
I guess you want a game that just makes people's jaw drop a little bit. You look at it and you think, wow, that does look like a battle, or it looks a bit like that scene in Spartacus where the
Yes.
Romans are doing their confusing, quasi historical maneuvers as they come down the hill. Just something that gives a bit of a sense of awe, because it's got 2, 3, 4,000 figures, or it's got a fabulous bit of terrain, or it's got more elephants than you've ever seen on a table before, or whatever. Really, you just want it to say something. You want it to go to just think, how did they, what happened at that battle? How's this guy put this together? Why has he wasted all his life baiting those figures up and all his money? if only that question. If only
Yeah.
that question.
Yeah. What was your first sort of encounter with a big game? Do you remember?
Ooh. Oh gosh. Well, I mean, as a kid, I grew up in Portsmouth, Cosham, just north of Portsmouth, and I don't think we ever really saw any big games. I don't remember ever seeing one. I was very jealous of the guys at the grammar school. They have this war games club where they did these massive games, but I never saw one. Um, um, at uni, no one really had a lot of figures. Uh, we had a friend of mine after uni had a cellar in his house in somewhere in Hammersmith, and he used to have a what we thought was a huge table, but it was probably 8 foot or 10 foot by 5 or 6, and we used to play some pretty big games on there, and that actually did start to feel like playing big games. I mean, the first I played I played a couple of games with Simon McDowell, who wrote Comitatus, amongst other very good
Yeah.
rules. He specialises particularly in the late Romans, and has a fantastic collection of beautiful figures, beautiful 15s, beautiful 28s.
Mm.
Um, Played a couple of games with him that were really, really something to see. And then I guess the games you see at Salute, really. I guess games that you see at shows are where I've first come across, really large games.
Yeah.
And
Some people I've spoken to have kind of a eureka moment, walking into the Wargames Holiday Centre, or mine was walking into Northern Militaire and seeing one of the sods. You remember the sods doing the Napoleonic games? I'm seeing one of them in my early teens, and going, "Oh, mum, that's what I want to do."
yeah, I never did the War Games Holiday Centre thing until I met Mark Freeth about 6 years ago, and I've still not done a Napoleonic game there. But I did a series of weekends with him where we put
Yes.
on some of my games. Um, Up to, in fact, one weekend we actually ran four or five of 4 or 5 pretty big games on 12 by 6 tables, and one huge game that was about 20 foot wide from my own collection. And it's possible to, because I've got so many sort of periods, like Roman armies, 3 or 4 different periods of Roman army, and the opponents for them. I used to be able to do that. So but not. I do like it when you see down there. You've got a table that's like 30 feet wide, and everyone's playing on the same table. That's a pretty cool thing. Doesn't happen quite so much with ancient battles, because they tend to be. You don't tend to fill a whole room with them. I mean, we usually go up to about 20 feet,
Yeah.
22 feet wide for some of the bigger battles. But one of the things, one of the things that one of the things I like about my rules is that they do actually scale. So it has dawned on me that one could do, if one could get enough figures together in the right sort of scale, one could actually do a game that was 30, 40 feet wide with maybe 6 or 8 players aside.
You have these ginormous chessboards on the floor in city centres, don't you? So you
Yeah,
want you want something like that, really?
I'm
That
not
would
sure I want to put any of my figures on a floor.
yeah, yeah,
That could go horribly wrong. It could be some kid could run over and become horribly impaled on
yeah.
100 pike.
You have to have pretty good public liability insurance
You
before
would, wouldn't you?
you
You would for
start.
that. So yeah, I guess the big games that I would have seen would have been originally at the war game shows,
Yeah.
and then that kind of inspired me, and I kind of got into doing my own off that. Went through a phase where we ran a few games. Did a fantastic Zama game with the lovely guys from Aventine in Belfast, and various other people from the UK. Everyone basically raised a Roman legion, so we had the 4 legions we needed, and some Carthaginians, and some cavalry, and when we totaled the whole thing up, we had enough to put on like a 15, 18 foot wide game that looked quite like a proper battle. That was a terrific fun game using command and colours. And then we did a later one at Partisan. We did a Pidna game, which was much the same thing, except it was bigger, and we had 5 players aside, and we had a huge hill. The whole table was a hill, basically sloping up towards the Roman positions higher up the hill, with the Macedonian pike attacking uphill. Well, that worked really well. That was around about the time I launched the Ancient Rules some years ago now,
Yeah.
7 years ago.
So Mark Freeth, who you mentioned, lovely guy. He's
Mm.
he's been a guest on the show. How did you get involved with Mark?
We ran into each other at I think it was Newbury, where I was running a game, and I think he came over and was kind of engaged by the way that it was all moving really quickly.
Yeah,
Um, um, and we got chatting, and I arranged to drop in. I took an army round to the when he was at the business park in near
in
Basingstoke,
Basingstoke. Yeah,
and I put on a game there and show him how that worked, and he bought into it, and we ran 4 or 5 sort of weekends, which were very popular, very successful. People really liked them. The end of it started to get a little bit tricky for me though, because the literally putting, I don't know, they were all had at least 2,000 figures on the table. You're running 5 games, that's at least 10,000, possibly 12, 14,000 war games figures. Turns out to be about as much as you can put in a car.
yeah,
I have a I have a car with I always make a point of having a car where all the seats fold down, but
yeah.
even so, it was enough. It really useful boxes stacked to the roof of the whole of the back of the car.
Mm,
Um, Reached really the upper limit of what I could transport, because I've got
yeah.
a lot more figures now. Um, these days, I quite like where there's a good plastic range, and there are plastic ranges I like and ones I don't.
Mm.
I quite like. I'm quite taken with plastic figures.
Certainly, when you're lifting them up and putting them into your car, you can see a massive advantage to it.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, it got quite industrial. I mean, when I go to a show, I need to take a trolley to unload the figures from the
Yeah,
car to get them into the table, and you have to start worrying about things like lift access,
mm,
curbs, deadly,
yeah.
deadly. Um, uh, and how you're actually going to get the 3,000-4,000 figures from the car into the place safely is quite a concern sometimes.
So how do you store them normally then? So are they in individual boxes that stack, or how do you
Yeah, so I must have, I don't know, 300-400 really useful boxes, I guess.
the best, the best?
Yeah, the best in all the sizes, all magnetically with like magnetic base lining, and all the figures are magnetized, so it's possible to shift stuff around reasonably safely without too much damage to the figures. Yeah, and that's basically how I do it. The only snag is, but I ran out of space for storing figures a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
and I last year I had got my cellar dug out, and in fact the year before last now.
Mm,
Last year I've actually got it ready for using it as a figure storage
mm,
space. But I thought I'd give it a winter and just make sure it wasn't going to flood.
yeah.
Uh, uh, and it seems to be okay. So I need to fit that up with racking, and then I'll be able to move a lot of my figures out of the house into the cellar. I have this great feature in my hallway. I've got a trap door in the hallway floor, so I can lift up the trap door and disappear
Oh,
into,
fantastic.
into what I call real Big Red Bat Cave,
Yeah.
which is now runs below my hallway and kitchen.
Super. Well, I've
Uh,
got to ask. I've got to ask at the start. Where does the big red bat come from?
oh right, so um, at the back in about 2004, I was playing a lot of Hordes of the Things.
Mm,
Brilliant set of rules, really. Possibly the favourite set of rules that I haven't written myself.
That's a high praise indeed.
Yeah. They're marvellous set of rules, really well written, very clear. And Well, I was playing that, and it's a game that's played. We were playing at the time on, I think, 2 foot square playing surface
Mm.
using spaces that are about. No, it must have been 3 foot square. 3 foot square playing surface using 28mm fantasy figures, and I was very into RuneQuest, and people will recall. I'm sure some of you out there used to play RuneQuest and have heard tales of the Crimson Bat,
Ah,
the sort of secret weapon of the Lunar Empire that
mm.
basically can eat whole armies and cities.
Yeah.
Has 3 tongues that can pick people up from a range of 2 kilometers, and has a temple on its back with its own priesthood,
Oh, yeah.
and some landing forces and everything like that. So we're playing on these 3 foot wide tables, and I just thought it'd be really fun to make a model that was as wide as the table. So I've got a 3 foot wide model of this crimson bat on a 6 centimeter wide base.
Oh, brilliant.
Um, if people go to, you probably find it if you Google Big Red Bat, or go to the Big Red Bat Cave, there's a link on the right that will take you to it. I haven't
Ah,
had it on a table in a few years, but
mm.
it's a lovely model, and it is about 3 foot wide. I made it out of, completely sculpted it from, made the wings out of wire with metal in between them, and covered the whole thing in green stuff.
Yeah.
Built models to go on the back of it, and there's a counterweight at the bottom in the base, which is a solid mass of lead that I made from melting down hundreds and hundreds of discarded Wargames figures, that were just figures that weren't salvageable in any way, shape, or form. Uh, and that's what. And at the time that I created my first accounts on anything. I was called. I just had to pick a name, and I just thought, oh, Big Red Bat, because that's what
Oh,
I'm
right.
doing. And once you've started putting that name on a couple of things, you become known as that. And so I don't know. Maybe people think I'm an American baseball fan or something, but no.
Well, I'm glad we've cleared that up. I'm glad
Yeah,
we've cleared that
I'm
up.
sure people have wondered.
Yes, I certainly
People
did. And
know.
I forgot to ask you in the first bit, but I constantly do that. So, while we're talking about big games, then what's the appeal to you of doing a big game as opposed to a smaller game?
Well, um, firstly, there's the visual spectacle, which is high up my list of things I kind of want to do. Secondly, you can get a bunch of people playing together,
Mm,
five, 3, 4, 5 people to a side, um, and so that's quite a nice communal activity. Um, and it's also interesting. Sometimes you see how one side is better organized. Maybe there's someone that has some leadership skills
yeah.
that can carry that side through, even against all odds,
Mm,
either with a good plan or just inspired leadership. So that's a fascinating thing to see. Plus, I like the aspect of being able to model a big historical battle.
mm,
Um, Although it's not, that itself isn't without its risks, because of course people generally know how those battles turned out. So I sometimes wonder if Waterloo, for instance, is a battle that you can actually
yeah.
refight, because so much is known about it.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because all the players know the pitfalls and know the mistakes that were made, and immediately set out to stop those mistakes happening. And therefore, inevitably, I think the
Yeah,
French. I think I've not seen official statistics, but I think French generally win recreations of Waterloo.
and that would be my impression as well.
Mm,
It's they are usually going to win, because I suppose it was Napoleon's to win on the day, and he didn't. But
mm,
he certainly wouldn't hang back. He wouldn't
yeah.
let the ground dry out if he knew that the Prussians were coming, for instance.
Mm,
Um, He'd have done something
and
earlier.
you know what's behind that crest. You're not
Yeah,
guessing because you know what's there.
and that is a problem with a lot of historical battles. Well, quite a few historical battles.
Mm.
You have to somehow force the players to act in a way that they probably wouldn't choose to, based on the knowledge that they now have. But anyhow, I love just the visual impact of a really big battle, and the way there's a story to be told, and often. It's quite nice, like when, for instance, at the Wargames Holiday Centre, we'd all end up in the bar that night
Yeah.
telling our war stories of the day. And I think one of the things about the rules is that they are they're quite narrative, in the sense that things tend to happen a bit could like you tell a story, and a lot of dramatic and occasionally improbable things happen that you'd want to tell someone about in the bar that night. Like when you charge the with your Ironsides, charge the enemy cavalry in the flank and missed with all 10 of their to hit cards, which, you know, which is people didn't do any hits. There were no hits. They missed with all 10 cards. People quite like that sort of thing, even though they're cursing the fact that it didn't work out as they'd intended. They like to be able to tell the war stories. Or I ran a I ran a show. You remember Lee? We were talking about Lee earlier. He brought his daughter to a show, and she was given a command on one of the wings, and she must have been a teenager, and she was up against three veteran wargamers, one of whom played a card and killed her general in the first 5 minutes of the game, which was just. It was cruel. Actually, she played like a trooper and sort of shrugged it off. But it's quite nice to have those sort of stories. The old one remembers one did a certain battle, one's very pleased with something one did, or can't help but forget something that went remember something that went disastrously wrong. So I like that with big battles as well. And that's one of the good things about the Wargames Holiday Centre. I think you do tend to get that ability to socialise a little bit afterwards. Is very nice.
Yeah. Do you we've talked about your Zama game.
Yeah.
What are some of your other favourite big games that you've run?
The Pidna game. I liked Zama and Pidna because they were both very collaborative, with about 4 or 5 people on either side contributing forces. And I haven't done that since, really, which is a shame, because it's such a good way of doing a game. I've tended to just use my own sort of core collection of stuff, because you can't always be sure that someone else is going to be able to be there. There is an element of risk when you're working with 4 or 5 people together, because if you need 4 Roman legions and you lose one the week before, then you're in a bit of a pickle. Whereas if I'm unable to make it to a show, then there won't be a game at all. But it will be a complete game if it happens, which it's almost certain going to. So I really enjoyed that one, and it was the last game I think I played in the old Callum Hall, which was a very atmospheric. Well, one of the last games I played there. Very atmospheric place, which I have happy memories of. Raffia. I've played that so many times with my, the big pike phalanx. It just looks great. Big pike phalanx and palm trees and Macedonian cavalry wedges charging forwards. And it's just a really, really, really good game that I've played many times and will play again. There was another great game did at Cremona with the Roman Civil War battle, the Partisan in the Park years ago. And that was great, because it looked for a while like Partisan wasn't going to happen. They managed to put up some tents and run it in the grounds, and it was the best ever day. I mean, the best lighting, having come from the Stygian gloom that was Kelham Hall, out into this light tent with the natural daylight sort of shining down everywhere. It was just great. Such a fabulous.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have fond memories of Kelham Hall, and then people remind them of the lighting in there. And
it was terrible. If you look there's a picture of the Pidna game on the on my blog, and
Yeah.
like 90% of the table is pitch black, and the other 10% is blinding. There's a blinding shaft of light that just illuminates this. It's like 2 foot square in the middle of the table, which is almost too bright to see. That was Callum.
Brilliant.
That was Callum Hall for you.
Yeah, that sounds all right.
So there's those ones. I mean, of the English Civil War games, my friend Andrew's got his 10mm. He's done quite a lot of the big battles, like Edgehill and I think Newbury, one of the Newburys maybe, and Marston Moor. His Marston Moor is his terrific game, which is about 18 foot wide, 20 foot wide, with 10mm figures, and that does look like a proper battle. I mean, it's terrific to look at. I was thinking the other day, it wouldn't be impossible to do it in 28mm. It probably only need a 30-foot long table, which could even be doable. But the depth of the table is often the problem with the biggest games like that. So you were saying?
I remember probably mid-90s, I think somebody did Marston Moor at Sheffield Triples 1-to-1 at 6mm.
Wow.
And that was pretty spectacular. I remember looking at that, and huge. It's one thing some people do really well. The guest on my last show, Jerry Elliott, from former owner of the Wargames Holiday Centre, he now does units with the same footprint as the 28mm units that he used to have, but he fills them with 10mm figures.
Yeah.
So it gives such a spectacular view of what an actual unit would look like. So
that's certainly one advantage, one big advantage of those smaller scales, to be able to produce something that looks. Sometimes it's really hard to grasp how big those battles actually were. I did a 1-to-1 section of a 32 rank deep pike phalanx, just for the sheer hell of it. There's some photos again on the blog, and it is just unbelievable how many men there were in those formations.
Massive, absolutely massive.
Yeah, hard to, really hard to conceive how that sense of how many people were involved, particularly in the ancient world where there were fewer people around. So I love that aspect of the game. So that was Manchester.
You often wonder in those pipe blocks, if you were in the middle at the back, whether you'd ever actually see any warfare at all, because you'd just be surrounded by all these guys and all these pike.
Yeah,
it'd be a bit of grunting and pushing at the front.
I guess if you're side one, you well not see anything. I think on the other end, if your side lost, you'd be I suppose if you're at the back, you'd have a better chance of getting off the battlefield than most.
You probably have the least armour, so you'd be able to run quicker.
Yeah, and I often think as well that if you had a pike phalanx, you've got all those 20-foot long pikes. That if the guys at the back drop the pikes, it would be a bit like one of those pickup sticks games. It wouldn't be possible to actually get back through the fallen weapons.
They could
be. Nasty thought. So there's that. Then of course there's my soggy bottom, the big 28mm named by Andrew Brentnall, who has a great way with names for games, which we ran at the English Civil War game that we ran at a couple of shows, and that was a really, really lovely looking game. Mainly designed to use most of my English Civil War collection. Isn't like one where I did all the figures for one battle. It's basically I bought figures on eBay and rationalised them into units. So I've got, for some reason, people love to paint. I've discovered people love to paint yellow and green coated regiments for the English Civil War. And I've probably got more yellow coated regiments than there were in the English Civil War. And green coats, they're quite rare green coats. So I've definitely got more green coated regiments. So the Soggy Bottom was a way of using all the figures we had available. A lot of the characters, the names of the generals were drawn from the archers.
Right.
and the regiments. Often the regiments were named after Archer's characters or places featured in the series. That's a very enjoyable game. It has been a lot of fun to run, and I'd like to run that again at some point. Actually, because I could do it sort of bigger now. I've still been accumulating. Well, I can occasionally find them on eBay now. Only occasionally.
Yeah, yeah.
If I see nicely painted figures, I will buy a regiment.
You've cornered the market quite clearly.
The,
So just to finish off this section then,
yeah,
big games have kind of drifted out of fashion a bit with a lot of the manufacturers now, and a lot of the stuff. The whole reason that this podcast started was because I got sick of listening to other podcasts going, "Oh, you can't do that in 28mm," and "Oh, that's too big." So, um, so if you had to give advice to somebody who was starting out in the hobby about getting into big games, what would you kind of say to someone?
Well, the best way of doing it is to assemble a group of people on a joint project,
Yeah.
because which is something I'm ashamed to say I haven't done very much recently. But there's just so much fun in 4 or 6 of you working together on a project that's got to be delivered on a certain date, collaborating, sharing ideas, swapping things, sending stuff backwards and forwards. It's much more fun than just doing it by yourself.
Yeah.
Much more motivating, and you. Whereas it's difficult for one player to get 3,000 figures together for a game, it's it's not that hard for 6 players to get 500 figures together.
Mm.
I mean, that's like when we were talking about the Bodkins earlier,
Yeah.
the Cressy game. I mean, they're all great painters individually, and when they're all collaborating together, they can
It
put
turns into a
something.
spectacle, doesn't it? Amazing.
Yeah, they can put something really, really, really great on. Whereas if they just had their individual army, it probably wouldn't look. It would just look like a small game. So that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Is to collaborate with other people and get something together. And I would like to do that some more. Actually, maybe I'll try and think of some things I could do to do that.
Good idea. Good idea.
Yeah.
Well, because I remember, I think it was War Games Illustrated. I watched a video with you, and they were kind of asking about the numbers of figures that were involved in a game. I think you said a couple of thousand, and quite clearly you could hear a pin drop. And I think
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and then you had to kind of go, well, you could play it with 200, 250. And I think they were they were expecting you to say about 15 to 20. I think.
Oh, bollocks! Oh, sorry. My right, expletive. Well, let's not. We're not into the S word here. Skirmish. We're
Yeah,
talking about
exactly.
proper
That's
big, proper
yeah,
big bag battles. And
yeah,
I mean, from in terms of playing one of mine, I mean, people 100 depends on the army, really.
yeah.
The 100 figures actually for some armies would be quite enough. If a cavalry army, 60 or 80 possibly. Often, I mean, I love the Perry figures and Victrix, I suppose, as well. They make some of these armies very accessible, very portable. When I'm going to competitions, um, one of the criteria I pick for picking my own army, apart from picking one that will be lethal, of
Yeah.
course, is to pick one that is extremely portable, because it's quite hard to shift it around sometimes. Um, so yeah, you don't need that many figures, but it helps.
It helps. It definitely helps, and we definitely like it on this podcast because we're
Yes,
very,
absolutely,
very biased towards big games.
absolutely. I mean, they cost me thousands, and I have got a lot of figures around this house. If you're down in London, come by and I can show you the mighty mounds of really useful boxes.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. Well, we'll take another break now, everyone, and we'll be back in a minute with our favourite section, the quiz. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, for the world famous Yorkshire Gamer Quiz. And the usual warning for everyone before we start this, that this is a bit of a laugh and a joke. Please don't get upset with some of the answers.
Ooh,
Um,
ooh,
ooh,
ooh.
and this is not right or wrong. This is just a test of how Yorkshire gamer you are. And if you've not heard it before, Simon, there is some extreme regional bias in some of these questions. So
No, I haven't heard this before. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, good. So all the answers are either going to be one word or a yes or a no answer. There's no
Okay,
15,000 word dissertations on shield patterns of the Macedonian phalanxes or anything like that. It's all yes or no or very
great.
straightforward. So we'll get going. And the first one is quite straightforward. It's go big or go home.
Oh, go big.
Go big, of course, of course. Contrast paints, are they great or are they a gimmick?
Pass. I've not tried them yet, but I will. I will.
You'll give them a go. You'll give them
Yeah, I'd give them a go.
paintbrushes. Would you go for Winsor and Newton or Yorkshire Made Pro Art?
I use a lot of Winsor and Newtons, but I haven't used Pro Art. Um, um, Rosemary and Co. I think are my favourites.
I'll give you half a point from that because Rosemary and Co are from Yorkshire as well.
Oh, okay, great.
There we go. I don't think there'll be any controversy with this one. 96 figures, is that an army or a unit of pike?
That is a unit of pike.
That is a unit of pike, of course. I don't know why
Possibly a small unit of pike, but
somebody said it's an army with supports. It's a unit. It's a unit of pike and a small one at that.
yeah.
A 6x4 table, is that a big game or a small game?
Depends on the scale of the figures.
Oh, we're from Yorkshire. It's either yes or no.
Small game.
Small game. Points-based army or a historical order of battle?
Historical order of battle, but carefully costed out for points, so we can see what the balance is like.
Yeah, I like that answer. I like that. When it comes to mixing paint, do you use one of these newfangled wet palettes, or are you on an old bit of MDF?
Tiles. I use
Tiles.
white tiles. Clean them off every night. Start again the next day.
Excellent.
Mix it all my paint on a tile.
That'll do me. That'll do me. If you were undercoating figures, would you go black or white?
Oh, grey.
Grey.
Alfred's
Oh,
grey. Who could use anything else as a primer? Oh dear,
dear me.
dear, 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 dear,
Dear me.
dear.
I'll give you half a point because you're in between. So you're offered a drink. Do you have Yorkshire tea or dirty mucky coffee?
Oh, coffee in the mornings, tea in the afternoon.
Is it Yorkshire tea though?
It is Yorkshire tea. Yes, yes,
Right.
it is definitively Yorkshire tea. See, look, this is my evidence
Oh,
here.
excellent. Thank you very much. We're halfway through. This is question 10. Wargame units. If it's historically correct, do you like the figures tightly packed or socially distanced?
I like them packed in as closely as you can conceivably pack them in.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's what we
The
like to hear.
highest possible density of figures that the base will permit.
Are we getting close to a black hole density? Is that what we're looking
Yeah,
at?
yeah. In fact, if it was possible to have them actually literally, Wargames figures tend to be broader, slightly out of proportion in terms of their width, so it is hard to fit them on.
Yeah.
But almost invariably, I like a 15 mil frontage for a 28 mil figure is generally my preference, my strong preference.
I can't stand a pike block where it looks like you could drive a bus between the ranks. It
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely,
It doesn't
absolutely.
Look right. Doesn't
It's
look right.
wrong
Wrong in
on
so many
many
levels.
levels.
Oh dear, we've got some complaints already. Right, so 2-hour club game or a weekend monster game?
Weekend monster game.
Of course. We are now on to the Nick Skinner honorary question. This is all related to Nick Skinner, so it's his fault. Well, you're from London, so you might not get this one. Avocado. Is it just posh mushy peas?
Mushy peas are posher than avocado.
Oh, I like that. I like that answer.
They're posher because you can get avocado any day of the week, but good mushy peas are hard to find.
That's true, actually. That's very true. Yeah, I like that.
Mm.
I like that. The universal question now. There's no pressure on you here, Simon, but everyone has answered this in the same way since episode 1. So this is round dice, spherical dice. Are they allowed or banned on your table?
Definitely banned.
Definitely banned. We're still
Firmly, unequivocally banned. Probably jumped up and down on as well.
100% of that question. 100%
Yeah.
of that question. This is the David Marshall question. Do you know David from the DM Train? You'll know his stuff.
Oh, yes,
You'll
yeah,
know
I
his
do,
stuff. It's great.
yeah.
So this is his question, and we're kind of drifting off gaming a little bit, but it's a funny one. You're going down the chip shop. Do you have haddock or cod?
Cod.
Cod, good man, good man. Right, for a rules writer, this will be a good one. Do you like a good table in a set of rules, like a casualty table or something along those lines?
No, actually, I don't really like a. I don't really like. There are tables in my rules, but I'm not a huge fan of them. Really, certainly not for where you have to look down one column and across the other and to see where it meets. No,
Yeah,
no.
no worries. Question 16. I'm expecting. I know the answer to this one. 28 mil is king. Yes or no?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
of course it is. Unpainted miniatures allowed on the table? Yes or no?
No.
No. You're doing very well.
I'd be producing a very disappointed look if someone came up with those.
Now we're back to we've got a couple of regionally biased questions back to back now,
Yeah.
and there's no coincidence that I'm wearing a Bradford City top for this question. So this question is Bradford City or Leeds United?
Bradford City, clearly.
Clearly, of course. Question 19, Yorkshire or the other place over the hill?
Yorkshire, definitely Yorkshire, yeah.
Definitely. Can't even say it. I said it once when I was speaking to Simon Hall, who did Mortimer Glorian.
Yeah.
And he's from Burnley, and I accidentally said the L word once on the. I lost 100 viewers straight away. And then the final question 20, is Games Workshop. Are they the work of the devil? Yes or no?
Yes, probably they are.
Oh,
I think
brilliant!
So.
Well, that's an excellent effort there, Simon. That's 85%.
Oh, excellent.
85% Yorkshire Gamer.
Excellent. Well, I think I should have got 2 points for grey because I covered both white and black.
No,
Not a half point.
I gave you half because you were being cheeky and you didn't answer the question properly. So there we go. But you were generally there or thereabouts. So there was only one big X, and that was the table in the set of rules, which I still enjoy. Well, thanks very much for that. And then we've just got another quick section before we move on to our big topic, and that's the Room 101, the Room 101 of Wargaming.
Yes.
Just for our listeners, if you're not aware, George Orwell in his 1984 book had a room of horror, and that was turned into a TV show on the BBC, and the guests could put in to Room 101. It was something that was a pet hate of theirs. So I call this the War Games tip. And if you've got something, Simon, you can present it to me. And
well, how many viewers can you afford to shed at this point?
Oh well, I'm doing quite well at the moment.
Anyone's still with us, in fact.
Yeah, we've got a bit of slack. People tend to enjoy this section the most, so
okay.
I think they like the controversy. Have you got something that you fancy sticking in the tip?
Yes, Ken. Yes.
Go on.
I would like to put in Room 101
Yeah.
bases that look like ruddy great doorsteps.
Oh, doorstep bases.
Doorstep bases. Especially the Sabo bases that are about a quarter of an inch thick and tower above the table, with troops that are on 2 centimetre round discs and consequently about an inch apart from each other when you fit them into the holes on the bases. So they're form troops that look like skirmishers. I don't mind skirmishers that look like skirmishers.
Yeah.
But no, really thick, blocky bases.
Yeah.
I think a base should be sleek and
Yeah.
low profile, hugging the table, part of the table, merging into the table, but a big square construction.
So you're
anathema
kind of
to me.
talking sports car bases.
I'm talking sports car. We're talking those. Is it Lotuses? The really
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
ones that just yeah.
And you're trying to get rid of kind of like your old boxy Volvos.
Yeah. Well, or taller vehicles. I guess we're talking the Land Rovers and Defenders and things like that. I just find the bases really distracting from the the aesthetic of the game. And it's difficult because I know people. If you've got figures that are mounted for skirmish gaming, people have. Then you want to get used out of them.
It's an oddity. They don't normally listen to this.
Yeah, but that's absolutely fine. But when they're put on the sabos, it just doesn't look right to me. Sometimes you've got sabos where figures are kind of based for wargaming on the sabo. That's not quite as bad, but I like a nice low base. 2 mil. My bases are about 2 mil thick, and I can't get them any thinner, unfortunately. It's not really practical to go any smaller than that. But I can, that's good.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a visual aesthetic that's lost when you're kind of looking at a base that's a third the size of the figure.
Yeah,
especially with 28 mil. Sometimes it doesn't look too bad, especially if it's all nicely sculpted and you've got grass tufts and stuff breaking it up.
Yeah, you can put a lot of effort into a base. The other thing is unpainted. Unpainted Sabo bases are worse than the Sabo base. So one of my friends puts a lot of figures into unpainted Sabo bases that are different colour to the bases of the figures that are in them, and the figures don't actually fit in the tray quite right either. So there's some of them are at angles. It's disturbing. So that's, I guess, I was thinking about.
I'm quite comfortable to stick that in the back of my trailer and take it back to the tip on Saturday afternoon. That sounds
that's good. We can save those figures. We can rebase them.
Yeah.
We can take them off those big ugly bases and put them onto sexy low profile bases. That's what we need.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much for that entry into Room 101 in the quiz. A good effort there. And we'll be back in a moment to talk about Simon's rules. Welcome to the main section of the interview. And we're going to talk to Simon about writing rules. I suppose the first question to ask Simon is what was the first rules that you wrote? How did you get into it?
Well, I've always written rules, funnily enough. When I was a kid, and I used to play, had a local friend. We used to wargame. I guess we were like 10, 12 years old, something like that. And as soon as there's two of you, you kind of need a set of rules. And I used to write the rules. I'm sure I used to win all the games as well. Having written the rules, I'm sure that was the way it went. So we would do these big battles with the Lego bricks, trying to represent a big historical battle, later with figures in various scales. Really, since then, occasionally I've had sort of forays into rule writing, but mostly I guess I started around about 2003, 2004, where I was getting there was a period where I got a bit frustrated and I couldn't find a set of ancient rules I liked. I just honestly, genuinely didn't like the way a lot of the rules worked. Some of them were a bit vague and imprecise, which isn't great, and others just didn't give the right sort of feel for the battle, or sometimes they were too detailed, they were too slow. Some games didn't work very well with multiple players, or you couldn't finish a game at a show. Because as I started taking my ever increasing armies of figures to shows, it started to become a bit of a problem that you bring all the figures there, set them all up, start a game, get about a third of the way into it, and have to start packing them up again at the end, which is not good news for anyone. So I started writing my own set of rules, and I had a couple of goes at writing sets of rules which hadn't really come to anything. I spent about a year writing the first draft of To the Strongest, where I was using 2d6 to activate units. And there was a bell curve, and it didn't work. Once you start putting modifiers on, if you've got a bell curve, you can pretty quickly get into the extreme results on the end of the, high or low. It wasn't good, and it was a bit frustrating. But after about a year, one of my other friends said, "Let's write a set of rules that we can use to run some team building exercises for business people. Well, that way we can make a little bit of money," because I was out of work at the time, and I needed some to generate some income to at least support my hobby. And I thought that sounded like a good idea, and I just sort of sat down, and within the space of about an hour, I'd kind of worked out all the mechanics. It was remarkable. Because I decided, right, okay, this 2d6, that's no good. I'm going to ditch that. Let's use a d10. And then I thought, nah, d10, that gets cocked all the time. I'll just use a playing card. And then I thought, well, if I'm using a playing card, then I can activate a unit to move. And then I could activate to move again by putting a higher playing card on top of that first playing card. And then there has to be a mechanism for it all to end. And that's obviously when something goes wrong, when someone fails. And then the idea came in of the generals being able to reactivate the unit that's failed if he's in the same box, or have another go at getting that unit to move. And I say within about an hour, I remember saying to my mate, "Oh, I kind of worked this out. Come around tomorrow and I'll explain to you how it worked." He looked a bit doubtful when he came around the next day, but it kind of leapt fully formed from from that one evening. And I remember saying to my wife, "I've been working on this set of rules for a year, and you've been helping to support me. And well, I'm actually going to tear them up and start again." But it was a really good decision, because the rules before were not good, and the rules that come out are fun. A lot of people play them and have a laugh with them.
So what rules were you inspired by when you were younger? What sort of commercial
Oh, I
sets
loved
did
the
you buy?
WRGs back in the day, particularly, I guess, fifth edition roundabout back there. DBA, terrific game. Hordes of the
Yeah.
Things, even better. In what other game can you pitch an army of accountants against an army of cheese on crackers?
Super.
An engagement I've seen fought. Brilliant, so
Yeah.
imaginative. I wish I was that imaginative. I guess those are my favourite. Those have been my
And
favourite ancient
what
rules.
was it in those sets of rules that drew you to them? What do you look for in a set of rules that isn't written by Simon Miller?
Command and Colours.
Mm,
That's got you've got real. It's very easy to play. It's fast. There's a lot of unpredictability in it. You never know quite what hand. You can play the same game twice, because you draw a different set of hand of cards. It
mm,
becomes a completely different game. Um, and I think that's very much what I liked about Command and Colors. Um, that also there's a little bit of I guess some of the things that carried across from that into my rules. One of the things is the victory medals. They have like a victory medal system where
mm,
you can see how the battle's going by how many of these things you've got left. And I
yeah.
modelled something similar into my rules. And also, as you're coming up towards the end of the game, um, you know that you need to take the last three medals, and you're looking at what moves you can make to try and win before your enemy gets another turn and control.
Yeah.
And then he gets a go at winning. You need to take three medals this turn in order to win before he gets a go at you. So you get an exciting, dramatic end to the game very often. So that's a very good thing from Command and Colours. I think from Hordes of the things, it's just my favourite set of rules like that. So imaginative. I've long meant to write a set of fantasy rules. I just hope they'd be half as good as Horde of the Things.
Do you know who? Do you remember who wrote those?
Richard Bodley Scott.
And that name rings.
Yeah, I think they're based on the it's like a fantasy version of DBA,
Right. Yeah.
played on I think a 3 foot, if I remember serves me, 3 foot square table, usually with 28 mil figures, like DBA, except obviously things can fly and hide, and you get the hordes of the title are when you have a unit of hordes that's killed, you can bring it back on the table again the next turn. So there's this endless series of these creatures recycling and coming on the table, and it's quite conceivable for your sorcerer to play a couple of ones on his pip dice and turn into a frog. It's just such a funny, humorous set of rules to write. It really is fun, and I went to a couple of tournaments back in the early thousands and really, really, really enjoyed that. In fact, I may have won one of the tournaments. I think the only time I've ever won a tournament, I think, was that. I've never won one with my own rules. That's for sure. That is for
So,
sure.
To the Strongest came out in 2000 and is it 6 or 7 years old now? To the Strongest.
Yeah, something. I was trying to think. It must be about something like 7 years old. And I'm a slow rule writer. I will frankly admit I'm not. I'm not the fastest. But they're well supported, and we close down the gaps. And there's been a lot of development in the rules since they came out. Quite a few mechanisms have changed along the way. The rule book has definitely some things. The current version of the rulebook doesn't include some of the mechanisms that were in the one that was originally published, and we have a supplement that goes with it with extra rules.
I suppose the thing that will be obvious to most people who look at it from a new perspective will be the grid system. How did that come into? How did that you come to use that rather than I'll use in inverted commas traditional tape measure system?
I'd come before I actually wrote the set of ancient rules. I had been playing a lot of Command and Colours, so it wasn't like I was familiar with the concept of using a grid, but we had I wasn't. We were trying at that time to play non-gridded games, and one night I had a horrific. I was playing against my best mate. We got on terrifically, but this particular night, for some reason, I guess we both were a bit stressed from work or something like that. We were playing with a set of rules that I won't name, but there's a lot of imprecision in the writing of the rules, like what happens if there's a flank attack and how do you line units up and things like that. We got into a terrific row during the course of play about whether I'd moved something too far or not, which I hadn't. I hasten to add.
Let's get that straight now.
And you get these swings in most sets of rules. There's a thing like buttocks of death in DBA where you try and or was it the W, one of the RG, where you basically put a unit slightly behind another enemy unit with its back towards it, and that stops the other unit retreating. And it was you were always trying to do this with your units. And I just thought, life is just too short to be having these sort of arguments. And the measurement, it takes so long, And I did debate about the Room 101 thing, whether to put in those little precision measuring sticks that are made of, they're machined and accurate to 10 decimal places. And life is just too short for that, And really, I always think when I'm writing a game, I want a game that can be played in less than 2 hours on a 6x4 table in a room over a pub when you're a bit tired and you've had a few pints of beer. I
Yeah.
mean, that, if the game can be played on that basis, then I think it's a pretty valid game. And certainly by skipping measurement, that takes a lot of time out of the game. Funnily enough, not having dice takes a fair bit of time out of a game as well. We can play when we do a tournament. We usually plan to play 4 games during a day. Now, not all of those 4 games will necessarily be completed, but usually 2 of them will come to a decisive victory or defeat, and 2 of them will be close, or 1 or 2 will be close. The better players will always finish their 4 games during a day. Pretty much they'll have won all four games. And so that's kind of where we are, really. And the game has actually got faster as we've gone along. Originally, I had a very boring mechanism in for commands running away when they'd lost 2/3 of their units. And we replaced that with a morale system where units can get swept away in routes. That shortened the game. Playing cards turned out to be a really fast way of playing. People are just chucking the cards down on the table. You can see the results. Everyone can see it. Even people like 5 or 6 feet away can see what's going on. You can see the pip on the dice, which is good for shows because you can see when the guy on the left wing, 15 feet away, lets out an ear-piercing scream, and you realise that's because his general has just played the second ace of the turn and failed to activate, and he's missed his whole turn. Then you can see that right the way down the other end of the table, what's gone wrong. They're good. So it's a fast game. I wanted to write a fast game. And with the grids and the playing cards, it's fast. I put a lot of luck into it too. Part of my original rationale was that the guy, before I knew it was going to be a proper published game, the guy, my local friend who I was playing, is very, very clever and very good at calculating probabilities.
Right.
So I made it as improbable as possible. So that he couldn't do that to me. So there's wild swings of fortune, in the game. Although most of the time, a good player, most of the time the best player wins. Sometimes he's not going to. It's just you can't always win.
When the rules came out, did you find because wargamers a bit like Yorkshire folk, they don't like new stuff, they don't like change. Did you have a bit of resistance to the grid?
Yeah, and frankly, why not? I mean, of course, they do. I mean, I was saying to someone the other day that grids are the worst possible system in wargaming,
Yeah,
apart from all the others.
yeah.
I mean, who wants to play on a grid? I don't. No. I mean, grids are fine. They have their strong pluses. They have their minuses as well. But on the whole, the ability to play a game in 2 hours whilst drinking half a bottle of reasonable French wine,
Yeah.
and not frying too many brain cells is the advantage. Disadvantages, aesthetics. Originally, we used to use squares with a solid line along them,
Yeah.
but we've kind of gone away from that now. We use small crosses at the ends of the square. So often people at shows don't even realise we're playing on a grid, which helps because the aesthetics are really important to me. I like the figures to look good. I like the terrain to look good. I don't want it to look like it's on a chessboard. It's not.
It certainly seems to have been something that's been more widely accepted as time has gone by, because people who make war games mats and tablecloths etc. would not be producing gridded cloths
Oh
if it wasn't working in some way.
no, and I mean I sold a lot of them over the last few years, so I know a lot of people have bought into the concept. A lot of people play it. It's popular. It's just the thing about it is it just makes it so easy to play a game quickly, and you can then concentrate on the fun bits of the game,
Yeah.
like ridiculing your opponent when he plays an ace. The important strategic elements of laughing at your opponent when something goes terribly wrong, you can really focus on those. One thing that actually turned out to be an unexpected blessing was during the recent lamentable epidemic, it turned out that grid-based games are really good for playing online over the computer, and we ran a number of very successful tournaments where quite often we'd have a couple of us playing and as many as 8 or 10 people just coming in to watch, just sitting on the thing, watching what was going on, picking up a few tips for their next game, and occasionally butting in to tell me when I was getting my own rules wrong, which happened more often than you might expect. But we had a lot of fun during the games and when we played it during the pandemic. Actually, my game improved because I played a lot more than I usually do, because I hardly ever play around here. But when I'm playing once a week online, I actually got quite good again.
So how long did it take then from that eureka day where it all seemed to come out to getting them
6
produced?
months, 6
Well,
months
that's
maybe
quick.
till we had the first PDF version of it come out. Then I published that, waited a couple of months for any obvious mistakes to drop out, or anything that people couldn't understand. I wanted to explain better, and then we ran I printed a rule book. It's all been quite a crash course, really. You need to learn how to write and structure a set of rules, which is it's quite a complex thing.
Yeah.
It's not trivial. And how to produce a PDF version of a set of rules, and then how to go from there to writing a book. Well, I was very lucky. A friend of mine, Millsy in Australia, Michael Mills, turns out to be a brilliant user of InDesign, and he helped me get my first book published. And he did the second one as well. And how to set up an online shop and fulfill digital orders and do accounts and a bit of marketing. It's been quite a learning curve.
And did you do sort of extensive playtesting prior to release?
We did do extensive playtesting of everything except for medieval period, where we did the Battle of Agincourt twice.
Excellent. That's skill.
No, I mean it basically the medieval thing turned out to work quite well anyhow, because it's pretty much the rules really as they stand go up to about 1500. So when everything is kind of man powered, it kind of works a little bit. I mean, you're getting better armor towards the end of the period. It's when you start getting arquebus and cannon in that can kind of discount armor, that it all changes a little bit, and that's really when you need a new period of rules. But they work very well for medieval. I played a lot of medieval. I quite like the medieval armies for tournaments because they don't have too many figures, and the parry figures are really great. So I can have a. I've often used Milanese or Venetian knights at tournaments. Myself, it's the army I've played most.
So I recommend we're running a little bit short on time.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
For going into a lot of detail about exactly how the rules work.
Yeah.
But I recommend people just bob online. If you put to the strongest playthrough or something like that on YouTube, there's a couple of really good instructional videos on there that I watched last night.
Yes.
I could quite confidently sit down and have a game now.
Oh, that's good.
The question that kind of drops out of that is how do you go about reflecting the difference between troop types and units and tactics over such a wide span of history within the mechanics of the game?
Okay, well, we have got, I guess, going back to what we were saying, a lot of stuff remains fairly common throughout history until you get to this until you get to the introduction of gunpowder, the extensive. So, a unit of skirmishers is kind of a unit of skirmishers. A unit of heavy infantry is kind of a unit of heavy infantry. Where there's a particular troop type, like a Roman legionary, that had a particular way of fighting, we can put in special rules for those. There's a special legionary troop type. We put in, there are a few unusual troop types, like we came up with a unit called the quincunx, which we used to model the Polybian Romans. And that's effectively 3 lines of Romans in one unit, one Wargames unit. It's what we call a deep unit. And it has, it can do line exchanges, but within itself to kind of rally itself. But it works. We have a pikeman in a Macedonian pikeman is not hugely different to a Low Countries pikeman of the 14th, 15th century. The Macedonians might be a bit better trained or better armoured, or not. So it does kind of work throughout, with the addition of special rules for some troop types.
Yeah, because I think I watched 100 Years War Game that had lance involved, and
Yes.
that had a I think it was a +1 or something like that.
The lance usually gives you an extra to hit card.
That was it. Yeah.
And the extra to hit card is really, really powerful, because it means that you can actually kill a unit. I should say that one of the things about the rules is they are extremely bloody. Units of skirmishers have 1 hit, and if they hit and they fail to save, then they're dead. Units die sometimes in the first 20 seconds of play. Your unit can be dead. It does. You're straight into the game. There's no hanging around.
If you've got a favourite unit, you need to keep it at the back to start with, anyway.
Oh yeah. If you've got a favourite unit, don't bring it. It's gonna die. Don't be too attached to it. It's a fast and bloody system, where most units have 2 hits, and if you're hit twice, if you're charged by a unit of knights with a lance, and the knight hits with both its to hit cards, and you fail both your saves, then your unit is dead. Not only is your unit dead, but the general that's with the unit might be dead, and the units to either side of it might fail their morale tests, and in some cases they might be off as well. I had a game once where I was playing against a guy in a tournament for about an hour and 40 minutes, and I'd slowly whittled his army down, knocking a hit here, a hit there, but nothing really happened until I managed to kill 1 unit in the middle of the line, and then all the other units failed in a cascade. There was a cascade of morale failures, and the whole army ran away. It was, I was probably a little bit triumphalist, which was poor form. I found it hard to restrain myself. But trust me, we can teach. We have children as young as 9 or 10 can learn the basic mechanics playing a game at a table, and once you've played 3 or 4 games of it, then you generally are going to know what's going on. But there's still loads of room. The nice thing is there's still loads of room to improve. The best players will win most of their games, because they've really practiced a lot and thought about the tactics and picked an optimum army, and there is room to become really, really good at it and stay really good at it.
So when you were writing, were you thinking about a balance between playability for those who want to do historical recreations and those who wanted to do a competition game?
Yeah, I made the decision fairly early on to do it to support competition games as well. Partly, I suppose, I come from a WRG background. There were always going to be points costs, because I wanted to have a rough idea about how the balance of 2 armies was going into a big game at a show. It was a revelation actually playing in the first tournaments, because I thought I'd written a fairly tight set of rules until I met the Wargamers at Chalgrove, which became our annual tournament, and they rode a coach and horses through the rules in the first year. So I went away and I plugged all the gaps, and I came back for the second year, and they rode the coach and horses a different way through the rules.
Oh, no.
But gradually they've become pretty tight and closed down, and I think pretty balanced now.
And do you have somebody who helps with the army lists? Because obviously it's a huge period of history to know
Yeah,
everything.
I do have lots of people help me with the army list. So we've got about 270, 280 army lists written
Wow.
now,
Mm.
covering almost any army that you can think of. Some of the more obscure lists aren't yet written, but I'm gradually getting round to the Knights of St. John in Rhodes. And I haven't done any of the Central American lists, the Aztecs and Incas and things like that
Mm.
yet. But the vast majority of the lists are written. And I try and write. I've got two books. There's the ancient book and the medieval book.
Mm.
And every 3 months, I publish an updated version of the army lists
Yeah.
to everyone that's previously bought them, because they cost $9.99 a book. But
Yeah.
for your $9.99, effectively, 3 months later, you get 3 or 4 or 5 or 6
Yeah.
or 8 even sometimes new army lists. And I'm
Mm.
writing. They're big. These are big publications. 150,000 words.
Mm.
There's a lot of background material on the armies and the history of the people involved. Sometimes the military history of the people. And I'm constantly adding to those. In fact, I've spent about, I guess, a good portion of my time over the last 18 months has been on writing the army lists.
Mm.
I'm kind of over the top with that now. It's sort of a bit downhill from here, because most of them are written. We're still refining some of them, and publishing. There's still a few that I haven't done, but I'm getting those gaps closed
Yeah.
fairly fast now. And then so that is taking less of my time up.
Mm.
But it has been a big burden over the last year getting these
Mm.
things done.
So I'm conscious we've only got a few minutes left. So
Oh gosh, yes.
how did the rules, or what's the big differences between To the Strongest and King and Parliament? If one had played
Andrew
one,
Brentnall. No, the main difference is okay, for the ancient rules. Their troops are generally heavy infantry or a missile weapon. And for King and Parliament, everyone has a missile weapon.
mm,
Every unit. If you're a unit of a battalion of pike and shot, you've got muskets. If you're cavalry, you've got pistols. If you're artillery, you've got guns. Everyone has a ranged missile weapon. And we made a slightly more complex series of when you shoot in For King and Parliament, the enemy shoot back at you. There's an
right,
exchange of fire.
yeah,
Whereas when you shoot into the strongest, they don't shoot back.
right,
There are a few things that are different. Pursuit rules for cavalry. Your cavalry are most likely to kill their opponents and ride off the table
mm,
in For King and Parliament. There's a lot more shooting, less meleeing than in the ancient set. But anyone that plays the two will recognise 80-90% of the mechanisms are going to be familiar. And indeed, I'm working on Renaissance at the moment, and that's going to be very familiar to anyone that's played either set as well.
yeah. I was going to say you've kind of done the first bit to the end of the medieval and then jumped to English Civil War, and
Yeah,
now you're coming back to the
and the
Renaissance.
Renaissance set basically the Renaissance set will go up to about 1600, and then after 1600 there'll be another set that will probably cover. It'll probably go from about 1600 to 1700. The Renaissance rules are well advanced. I just haven't had time to finish them and publish them,
Mm,
but they are written largely. The other set aren't written. Might well be based on For King and Parliament. I've been having a few chats with Andrew this last week. We've
mm,
been getting very excited about the Battle of Lutzen and Swedes and Imperialists. Also chat with David Imrie, who's painting and basing some very nice Imperialist figures at the
mm.
moment. So we might well go with something that's a bit more For King and Parliament based for that period.
And how far do you think the mechanism would go? I mean, 7 Years' War springs to mind straight away with the linear tactics, how that
Uh,
could run forward.
World War Two would work.
Yeah.
Definitely. I had a go at scoping out World War Two about a year ago.
Mm,
I realised it would definitely work. It's just I realised that if I did it, I just didn't have the space, the free time to actually do it whilst writing the other
Yeah.
systems as well. So I put that on a back burner. But my intention certainly is to do the 16th and the 17th centuries. I know Andrew's quite interested in doing the War of the Spanish Succession and the War of the Austrian Succession, so that might well happen afterwards. And I guess I would like to very much to do a fantasy set
Yeah.
at some point, because I just think it's a very good way of engaging, particularly younger people who will do the fantasy version and then hopefully get into the historical stuff
Yeah.
off the back of it.
It's a nice crossover point, isn't it?
Yeah, we need to bring new people into the hobby as well, and that would be a good way of doing it. But who knows where I'll get? But certainly the Renaissance are quite advanced. I just need to get them finished.
You're nearly there. Nearly there.
Nearly,
You can
nearly
see the finish line. You can see the finish line.
I can. They've got a lot of the figures painted now, so I need to get some rules out so I can play some games with them.
Exactly. I'll bring my Italian walls down, and we can have.
Oh, absolutely! I'll hopefully have a few of my own. I've still got to finish that Swiss army off. That's got over 600 figures in it, and they're all painted and mostly based. I just need to.
Well, we're coming to the end, and we didn't really get a chance to speak about your wavy bases.
My wobbly edge bases, yeah. What do you always have me back for?
We do catch up episodes every 10 episodes. We do a catch up, and we get people on
right
for 20 minutes, half an hour, so we could cover wavy bases.
Covering the aesthetics of basing and the need for chamfering.
There's a proper engineering
bases, everybody. Chamfer the edges. It's most important.
That's a proper engineering term, chamfer.
Yeah.
I like that word. I do like that word.
Very important.
So, if people want to get hold of the rule books, do you have scenario?
We've got a lot of scenarios for the English Civil War. I think I've only published one scenario for the Ancients. I have talked about publishing more. It's just a question of time. Probably the way it's going at the moment, we're probably more likely to get some more English Civil War ones published. I'm working with some lovely guys who are looking at a load of battles around the Celtic fringe, Montrose, Ireland, Scotland, obviously, and it's quite likely that we'll be producing those over the next couple of years, which will go with For King and Parliament, the English Civil War stuff. But I really ought to. I have lots of scenarios written for ancient battles. I just haven't published them, and it would be a really good idea for me to do that. But there are huge battles with thousands and thousands, dozens and dozens of units, so they're not necessarily for the faint-hearted.
Well, that's what we want. Maybe you could have like a health warning on the front of it.
Yeah.
Don't open this book unless you've got at least 1,000 figures.
Yes.
So where would people go to get hold of copies, Simon?
If you just Google Big Red Bat Shop, that will take you into my shop where I sell everything. I sell so the rules, scenarios for the English Civil War. I sell the bases that people like to use sometimes. Very importantly, I sell the gridded cloths. If anyone wants a gridded cloth, I import those from Deep Cut in Lithuania, and I also sell some of the Geek Villain UK-made ones.
Yeah.
And I sell a lot of other gaming products. I released some new coloured chits today. Some people don't like using the playing cards. They use chits from a draw bag, and so I sell those in all sorts of different bright colours, and chits for recording damage or whatever on your units, and various other things. There's a lot of stuff in the shop. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, it's been an absolute joy to speak to you today, Simon. Thank you very much for your time.
It's been lovely being here.
Thank you. And if you'd just like to say good night to everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you very much. Good night. Well, another cracking interview there with Simon Miller. Really enjoyed that one, and I hope you did too. few sound effect problems as always, but I hope that didn't spoil your enjoyment. And the next episode, episode 23, is going to be one of our catch-up episodes. So slightly different format to normal. There's going to be 3, 4, 5 maybe short interviews, 20 minutes, half an hour, and we're just going to be catching up with people who've been on the show before. So I'm hoping to speaking to Simon Hall about his latest ventures. He's got a new rule set out, and he's working on a board game of Rome Total War. And I don't think there's many people who've wargamed that haven't played that game on a computer. So that's going to be quite exciting, speaking to Simon about that. Dr. Chris Brown from way back in episode 3, unfortunately he had to cancel his Arnhem game weekend just after we spoken to him due to COVID, and he's hoping to be back this year, fingers crossed, in Arnhem, fighting, recreating Arnhem type games in a hotel that is actually in the pictures of the Arnhem battles. So hopefully we'll have a quick catch up with Chris, see how he's getting on with that. And Mark Freeth as well, I hope to be speaking to him just about the Wargames Holiday Centre that's now open, up and running, and I hope to be visiting myself for some bit of Italian Wars later on in the year. So couple of potential other guests, maybe. We'll see how we get on, but there'll be lots to listen to in that episode that will be out in the second week in April. And it's a 5-week month, so we're going to have 2 episodes next month. And I've lined up, fingers crossed, quite a big manufacturer who I don't think has done many podcasts in the past, so that's going to be a good one. So looking forward to that, and we've got stuff booked up into the future now. Looking at my next free episode, probably in July, would you believe? Just things slot together very quickly, sometimes without me even realising. Before I know it, I've got another 3 months booked in. And to all those guests who I've spoken to about coming on, I will get around to it. I do promise, but the less shorter number of episodes that we're doing with this new format means that I don't get around to everyone as quickly, but I do stay very enthusiastic and I'm wanting to do more episodes, rather than it was a little bit of a chore trying to do 2 a month. I'd rather have it this way. So please be patient, and we'll get around to everyone eventually, 'cause we ain't going anywhere. So until next time, see thee.